Welcome back to another podcast here in the Ram's Den. And today, my guest is Zach Elwood. Zach, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So Zach, you are an author and a podcaster, and you focus, at the moment, your focus is, well, it's always been human behavior, but at the moment, you're writing a book about the polarization of the US, and which is very interesting to me. And you know, the US, it sets the tone for a lot of other countries, right? So it's very important. What's going on in the US right now is very important for not just you guys, but for everybody else. So very excited to have you here to get into that. And well, I said I wasn't going to tell people this, but I'm going to do it anyway. You're also the co-founder of Elwood's Organic Dog Meat as well. It's an entirely different thing, but so it's very
co-founder. But I should say it's you know, it's all my wife's thing. But we just thought of the idea together. Yeah.
Well, we had a great interview, a great podcast the other week with Molly. It was brilliant, really well received. People absolutely loved it, and had a lot of crazy reactions. So that was really cool.
Nice.
But no, really cool that you guys put that together, and you know, yeah, I'm sure a lot of vegans appreciate that work, as we found out a couple of weeks back with that podcast. But today, like I said, entirely different. So before we get into this kind of what you're writing right now, and you know, asking all the questions about that, let's learn a bit about you, because this is not really where you came from, is it? You came from a very different background. So tell us a bit about your background and the kind of journey to this position where you're now writing this book about polarization.
Yeah, it's a combination of things. Like I'm most well known for my work on poker tells, which is poker behavior, and I used to play poker professionally. And that led to me writing these poker tells books and being well received. A lot of people say the books and the videos are the best work on the subject out there. Sold a good amount of copies. My first book's translated into 8 languages. So then that led into, and I've always had an interest in psychology. So between the poker and the psychology interest, that led to me doing my behavior and psychology focused podcast, People Who Read People. And I'm someone who's politically liberal, more liberal leaning. And, you know, part of my journey with this polarization work was, you know, I started out really angry about Trump and angry at Trump supporters, you know, when Trump got elected, and to be honest, I'm still, you know, I think Trump is a horribly divisive and bad person. But what changed in my journey was seeing the things that drove the conservative anger and concerns more than I did when I started out, you know, in 2016 or so. And I started examining the way the narratives on that side, and that led into me having an interest in the polarization topics. And so I started working in the polarization stuff into my podcast and my writings, and trying to help people see, you know, that seeing other people's perspectives is valuable, no matter like what the endeavor is, right? It's like, it's valuable to see other people's perspectives because it reduces anger. And, you know, a big part of the things driving our divides, not just the United States, but, you know, across, you know, almost all countries have been polarizing since 2005, you know, research shows. So a big part of lowering divides is just being able to see what drives the other side's concerns. And a lot of times we have a very distorted view of what they're actually, you know, concerned about, or what drive, you know, we can strongly disagree with them while also seeing their perspectives.
Got it. And yeah, I mean, you're completely right about, it does feel like things have been getting worse and worse since, probably since, like, I don't know, 2005, I suppose it is. I think for me, it feels like it was more, especially the worst bits of it seem to have come up in the last 5 to 6 years. I feel like it's really come to a head. You're talking about the left-right divide, or whatever, liberal conservative divide. It's also kind of expressing in, you've got these kind of, I don't know, I call them kind of like Antifa type people, let's say, not specifically Antifa, but of that ilk. And then you've got the MAGA and the MAGA ilk, and they often accuse each other when actually the other one isn't the other one, if that makes sense. Like the MAGAs was, oh, you're an Antifa, and then, no, I'm not. And then Antifa's, you're a MAGA, no, I'm not. This is going on quite a lot. You've got the feminists and LGBT, and then you got what they're calling TERFs. It's like an insult now, and then this is going on. This is, the feminist movement is going crazy with that. People all attacking each other, and even in the vegan world, which we're both in, you've got the there's no really better word for this. I mean, the kind of, I guess, woke or ideologue vegans, and they consistently attack those who they don't think fit into the think are harmful or whatever, and then those guys kind of fight back. And so it seems like across every group almost there's some level of conflict going on, and it's kind of like we're more divided than we've ever been, even though we're more connected. We have more opportunities to
Yeah.
connect than we've ever had. And we all hate each other the most we've ever done. At least there's no,
Mhm.
like, obviously there's no world war or anything. There's not quite that level, but socially, I mean, culturally, there's a lot of hatred and division. So what,
Mhm.
I mean, this is a big question for you now. We're going to start big. How do you think we got here? Right? Is it any one thing that you think is, oh, this is the thing that's done it, or is it, are there multiple? What do you think it is?
Yeah, and I should preface everything with the statement that I don't view myself as like the expert on these things. It's more that I'm interested in these things, and like
Okay.
part of my work has been trying to like compile different views across on these kinds of problems,
Hmm.
and the people I interview give different perspectives on these kinds of problems. So I think and a big part of it to me is a big part of the solution is even just seeing how people can have different views, can reach different perspectives, and like we often just like you're saying, we jump to these assumptions about what they're believing, right?
Mm.
So all that's just to say, before I talk about the causes as I see them, to say like no matter what I say or what other people say, I think the important thing is seeing how there can be all these factors for like our
Hmm.
different narratives about stuff and our conflicts. It's like seeing how these other people can reach a different viewpoint is so important. But
Hmm.
as far as like the origins, I think there's a range of factors there. There's all these like feedback mechanisms at work.
Hmm.
In Peter Coleman's book, The Way Out, which Peter Coleman's a well-known conflict resolution, peacekeeping kind of person. He talks about, there's often this mistaken focus that we're going to find like these magic bullets that drive our divides, right? Like whether it's social media or whether it's the news or
Hmm.
whatever it is. But he talks about how it's a much more complex thing of like there's just fundamental aspects of our human nature that play out in various ways. We
Hmm.
obviously throughout human history, it's common for us to be in these conflicts, right? Like we have a lot of war, a lot of violence. It's common for us to come into these us versus them mentalities,
Hmm.
and there's just various ways that gets reinforced. So some of the ways you could see that being reinforced is uh, just the modern proliferation of viewpoints, like not
Hmm.
just social media, but like the fracturing of the digital TV landscape. We used to just have a few channels that gave us the
Right.
narratives, and now we have like hundreds of channels and hundreds of places to get all these differing viewpoints. And there's just a fundamental human tendency to form into these us versus them mentalities, right? Like
Hmm.
we tend to be think about our group of whatever the group is, and we tend to like stereotype whatever the other group is about their beliefs. Then there's like aspects of modern life. Like so, modern life is more isolating, right? There's all this research and books about how we're more lonely than ever. We spend more time online. We
Hmm.
lack these social institutions, and so then you can see people, instead of getting their sense of meaning from like their local community and going out and doing things, they're
Hmm.
getting their sense of meaning by going online and getting in these big fights that are like national, or the major political fights in their cultural fights in their
Hmm.
country. And then you've got all these different ways people can be in these bubbles online, right? Like the social media bubbles. And,
Yeah.
there's research showing how, group polarization, with like minded people, the views grow more extreme, the more of a bubble they're in.
Yeah.
So you can just see all these like fundamental human nature things that lead to us, fostering these angry us versus them mindsets. And my
Mhm.
take is, we're not gonna escape this, but I think
Mhm.
the path out is more people just even recognizing that it is a fundamental human tendency and cutting people some slack. Really, it's like
Mhm.
even the people I think are like the most divisive people, it's not as simple as like they're causing the divides. It's like the divides inside all of our minds
Mhm.
is what is giving those people power, right? Like they wouldn't have
Right.
power if the divides weren't inside of a lot of us, right? So
Yeah.
it's a complex thing to solve, right?
Definitely. I adding to that as well. I like what you said about that people are finding their meaning from the online space now and arguing. And I think on top of that, and it's probably very much intertwined with it. It's all connected. I feel like when I was growing up, and probably when you were growing up, to be recognized as someone who was good, virtuous, you had to be doing something good or virtuous. Like you'd have to go and volunteer for charity and come home and you'd tell everybody, "Yeah, I volunteer for charity," and everyone would go, "Wow, you're an amazing person. Well done." And now that's not necessary anymore. All you need to do to get that pat on the back is have a bio, has something in it, right? Like some words or flags. And then if you look at that's step one, you get some virtue for that. People will pat you on the back. Or on top of that, start getting into some arguments and quoting some mantras, of it doesn't this is not specifically a left or right thing. Every group has its mantras, right? So do some mantras, then you get the pat on the back again. You actually don't have to do anything. Actually, you don't have to leave the
Mm-hmm.
house really to do.
Mm-hmm.
You can go order the food in. You can get everything
Yep.
online. All your virtuous stuff is here now. Like you don't have to actually do anything. And even if you wanted to be virtuous, I mean, that's donating to charity. That in itself can also become a thing you post about. So even if you do
Mm-hmm.
do something good, it's so yeah, you're totally right. And it is.
Yeah, I
Do you
think
think that is connected? Do you think that is connected with what you said about people finding their meaning online and part of the
yeah,
reason for this?
yeah, for sure. I think Ezra Klein in his book Why We're Polarized. I mean, one of the things he wraps up with, and for the record, I think his book wasn't good because I think it failed to take into account how a lot of the things he talked about were present on the liberal side too, and that's one of the
Mm,
things I'm working on with my book is examining those things on the liberal side. But one of the things he wraps up that book with, which I agree with, is like there's so much this focus on like being online and being aware of things, and like we take it for granted that like, oh, just being aware of something and being angry about it, or just being aware of what's going on is like
mm,
makes us a good citizen or makes us a good
right.
person or something. But it's like, his recommendation is, go out and do something local. Like, do if you care about a cause, go out and do something locally. We need to start focusing more on our communities and less on these, because how is me getting angry about something, or even trying to convince people of something on a national level, some big scale level, how is that really changing anything, right?
Mm,
You'd be hard pressed to try to change something on a national level. The only real way you're going to get traction is trying to focus on some community thing.
mm,
And I think there is, there is a great book too, uh, that I interviewed the author from my podcast. It's called Why It's Okay to Ignore Politics, which, that triggers a lot of people, that
yeah.
idea on both the right and the left, because we tend to have this assumption that like just being aware of all the things is like doing something. But
Mm,
he's a political philosopher and pokes holes in a lot of these assumptions we have. It's like, is it, am I doing more good for the world by, spending hours a week getting angry about various things and posting about various things, or am I doing more good by going out and helping with some
mm,
cause in my community? So he really pokes some of the holes in those ideas, and I think we are just much too focused on, we tend to, yeah, like you say, we tend to think that we're accomplishing something. I tend to think like most people who think that, most people on Twitter, for example, I think
mm.
most people on Twitter who spend a lot of time just posting angry takes are actually doing a net negative for the world. Like I think
Right.
they are not helping in any way I can see. And I think they tend to operate with an assumption on both sides. Like I'm doing something, but
Mm,
I think we should we should be skeptical about our beliefs about like what's good or what's helping and what's not helping, and how
sure.
much of this stuff is just adding to our divides by riling up anger and actually helping the create the very things that you're angry about.
It's a good point, and I want to touch on the thing you said there about the perspective of the perception of when that we're doing good if we are online, and if we're not online, then we can't do good. It feels like this is kind of what a lot of people have fallen into, and it's probably causing some of this. And there's a great example of that within the vegan world, actually, which I don't know. I don't know how into it you are. Like, I don't know in the activism side of things, but there have been, this has been an issue for years and years, since I've been doing this for, like, I don't know, since 2017. And the issue's always been that the most well-known vegans and the activism space are like Earthling Ed, Joey Carbstrong, and James Aspey at one point, and Gary Yourofsky. These are all kind of big names, like, millions of social media views and blah 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 and all that stuff. And then people start having these hot takes, like, oh, why is it all white men? Only white men are represented in veganism. And it's like, no, 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 that's not true. They're just the ones that are famous online. On the ground, an activist world, on the ground, people actually doing activism, it's like it's 80% women. By like that, then it's probably more than that. And it's just because they're not famous, it doesn't mean that they don't represent, vegans, right? It's just that they didn't get famous on social media. Social media isn't the world. It's
Mhm.
actually far
Mhm.
more important. They are doing far more important work than, in my opinion, all the most famous vegans all put together, in
Mhm.
my opinion, right? It's
Mhm.
what they do on the ground is harder. It's more important. They get less thanks for it. They get less funding for it. They're doing the hardest stuff that you can even do. So this is a really, I think
Mhm.
that's a good example to kind of express this, really show this obsession with social media, that people just, they don't even acknowledge that, right? That it's not the world,
Yeah, I think we do tend to treat social media as like vastly important.
right?
On the political right and left in the U.S., it's like you can see this with like conservative people, being like the government needs to force Twitter to be, embrace free speech and have minimal content regulation because Twitter is so important. And similarly on the left, like you're saying, it's like there can be this distorted thinking of like, look at these horrible things people are saying on Twitter that that this represents the other side, or when in
Right, right,
actuality
right.
the people saying the worst things on social media are like a fraction, a tiny fraction of
Mm,
the entire group, right? But we let these takes influence our perception of like how the entire other side thinks. And
definitely.
so yeah, I think there is just the media news media covers social media takes as if it's news because it's easy to cover. It's like easier to cover social media stuff than it is to actually do a story and go out and find out, what's the nuance of what's going on in the
Yeah.
outside world. So it's like it's a shortcut to be like, hey, here's some stuff people said online. So then we perceive we
Yeah.
perceive that it's important, right? But it's
Oh,
just not nearly as
I've seen
important.
some brilliant stuff from that, actually. There was this I think it was back in the Euros, the football competition, the Euros, and England got knocked out, and the penalty takers, the ones who missed the penalties, were black, right? So obviously there was ripe ground for people to make horrible comments and jokes and whatnot about them being black and being the only ones who missed the penalties, right? And some people made jokes, and that's like, comedians, all right, it's not really whatever, right? Whatever. That's a whole other topic. But some people were very racist. They're actually horrible, made some horrible comments, and the media did exactly what you said. There were hundreds of thousands of comments that were saying, "Thank you for all you tried. You did well, guys. We'll get the next one." There were maybe what, couple of hundred, probably maximum, of nasty comments coming from alt accounts, fake accounts, people who weren't putting their own. And the media, what did they focus on? Did they focus on the love? Of course, they didn't focus on the love. They picked out some random, no name, no face people's, comments, and said, "Oh, look at this racism," and then everyone's angry, and then it's a
Yep.
real, it's really, yeah. And then they stoke it. They stoke the flames, don't they? They keep the division. They cause this a racial tension. Um, and we see it over and over again, don't we? Especially with the racial stuff. The media loves getting people upset about with racial tension. They do it roughly every 4 years. I've noticed, especially in the USA, they like to drum up this stuff. But yeah,
Yeah,
so yeah, you're
that's one of
totally
the things
right.
I want to examine, or I am
Mm,
examining in my book, is showing a liberal audience how those things are perceived by rational and well-meaning people about
mm,
how the media can be a cause of our divisions, right? And
mm,
that's not often focused on, but I think even if liberals will disagree with that, I think it's valuable to see that perspective and to spend time thinking about those perspectives. And I think that's what gets in the way of us, having
Mm,
productive conversations. It's like we tend to, if we feel like a topic is insulting or demeaning to our side, or is
mm,
like
mm.
somehow helping the other side, if we perceive that conversation as, helping the other side or hurting us,
Mhm.
we should kind of shut down and like say there's nothing to talk about there. But
Right.
at the very least, I think often with our divides on any specific issue, it is easily possible to see what drives the other side, and I think we need to do more of that, right? Like,
Mhm, mhm.
veganism is a good example. You often have people that become vegan, and then they're the ones being the most angry at the omnivores. When I'm like, you were just an omnivore like a month ago, like, maybe you can remember what it was like, and
Yeah, totally.
remember how the messages may have not reached you immediately,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, I
yeah.
think it's there seems to be a lack of this understanding that it's you can explain someone's behavior without saying it's okay that they behave that way. And there's
Right.
a big miss here. People miss that. They like when you. I've had a little bit from vegans myself, and I've thought, "Oh, this is why they do that." And then they say, "Oh, you're trying to make excuses for them." It's like, no, I'm telling you why they act how they act. The more you know about why they do what they do, the easier it's going to be for you, technically, theoretically, to get that to change. But yeah,
Yeah.
people on the left right political spectrum, on the far ends of it, let's say the more extreme ends of it, it seems that that's not an option. I'll be totally honest with you, and I'll have to just tell you the truth that I've seen way more of this coming from the liberal side. That they're more intolerant. And absolutely no interest at all in listening to anyone they deem to be on the other side. And I've seen far more from the other side where they say, "Come and sit with me and talk." And even though if that discussion is not useful, they still offer the opportunity. Say, "Come and sit with me. We'll talk about it." But from unfortunately, the left liberal side, that I mean, doesn't happen very often, if ever. And I don't know if you agree with that, or if you don't want to say, you don't want to rile up people, but
No,
that's
I will.
that's my observation.
Yeah, I'll give a take on that. I did want to focus on something you said that I think is very
Mm,
important. I think the it's there can be a perception that even trying to understand other people's perspectives is like saying that they're right, or you're helping their argument, but
yeah.
like you say, it's like we can attempt to understand other people and the motivations that and the factors that drive their behavior
Mhm.
while strongly disagreeing with it, right? It's like I
100%.
can I can I can be cognizant of what drives an omnivore's arguments, because I was omnivore. Even after I was raised predominantly vegetarian, I became an
Mm,
omnivore for several years, 15 years. And so like I can understand why people don't care, right? And now I think that, and I can strongly disagree with that now that I'm almost entirely vegan. I'm like, I eat oysters occasionally, but which some people would still
I
consider
was going to say,
vegan.
yeah, some
Anyway,
people
get off on a
that's a whole other
tangent.
debate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll keep going. But what I'm saying is, we can see what it is that drives people's behavior while strongly disagreeing with it. But I think I
Mhm,
think for a lot of people, it's like there is that feeling of like, if I give them a little bit of if I give them a little bit of credibility by acknowledging there's reasons, then I'm helping them, right? But I just think,
mm,
like you said, that's understanding other people not only reduces our anger at them, but actually helps you persuade them to your argument, right? Like if you come at them with these distorted ideas of what they believe,
mhm,
you're just not going to reach them. Like, so it's however you want to use the understanding of people, whether to persuade them or depolarize, it's all the same. It's like that's how
mhm.
you persuade people. Like, it's how you change people. You don't change them by shaming them or calling them idiots or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, to your question about social media, liberal versus conservative. Yeah, there's that problem on both sides. I think
Mm,
one thing that might influence the thing I've seen on Twitter, for example,
mm,
or other social media, is that because I think we can acknowledge that they are liberal leaning, so that's why a lot of conservative people have left those places. So I think there can be a dynamic of, because we perceive a lot of the most rude and horrible liberal people on Twitter, that we can start to form this perception that, like, there's a much bigger problem
Mm.
on the left, but like if you go into some of the places where a lot of far right conservative people congregate, if a lot of those people were still on Twitter, for example, I think they're coming back because of Elon, right? But
Mm.
I think there's a lot of people that don't want to have respectful conversations on both sides, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't have an opinion on which side is worse.
Mm.
I almost think it's unproductive to think about it or even try to quantify it, because it's like
Sure.
each side is going to be able to create narratives about why the other sides are worse, right? And like,
Yeah, of
but
course.
I will say I agree with you. There's a lot of people. I mean, I specifically know I know in person influential people on Twitter and other social media who I think are
Hmm.
actively driving our divides, right? And
Okay.
I've called some of these people out, and I think some of these. I think part of the solution is recognizing how the people on our side contribute to our divides and are contributing to
Hmm.
the very things that they're angry about. And I think
Right.
there can be this weird incentive on social media to draw attention to the insults we get from other people, right? There's
Mm.
people I know on the liberal side who will hold up these insults and be like, look what they said to me, and then they get a lot of love and a lot of likes and a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
attention, and they rile up anger. But it's like you said, it's like you're responding to this random troll who does not at all reflect the large majority of and in the same way that conservatives can hold up the horrible thing said to them by a liberal
Hmm.
person and say, look what they said to me. And there's these incentives that people on both sides have because they get a bunch of attention for it.
Hmm.
I saw that point talked about in Gia Tolentino's book. uh, it was about social media, something about a mirror, the book title.
Mm.
But she talked about the kind of like the perverse incentives, and she was talking about in the context of like Gamergate and how she could have easily held up like these examples of her getting abuse from all these random horrible trolls, the DMs that she would get. And she's like,
Yeah.
other people, and other people will do that. There's an incentive to be like, look at these horrible things people said.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you have to make a conscious effort to not do that, because you have to examine like, well, how exactly is this helping? Am I just adding to our divides by acting as if
Mm.
this is a meaningful, a meaningful or often held
Mm.
viewpoint from the other side? So I think a lot of this comes down to just questioning the ways that we use social
Mm.
media, and questioning the ways that people who we support use social media, and just speak generally. Yeah.
And what could that not? I mean, I was thinking as you were talking about that. I know some situations where that wouldn't be good, where like just posting like a some kind of hate mail or something would be bad. But I can also think of some situations where it could be useful. Like for example, I personally I get some really silly troll comments. Not just the like. Occasionally, I get the threat or whatever, but most of the time it's just bad arguments. And I tend to post up these bad arguments, and usually with some kind of sarcastic reply, or sometimes I just completely ruin the argument. And the purpose of that is that I want other, and my aim is that my idea is that other meat eaters would see that and go, I don't want to be like that idiot, and then that brings them on my side. That's kind of my logic with this.
Mm-hmm.
So with the left right divide, is that not potentially a way to, like, for example, if someone's on the left side and then they show a terrible argument from someone sent them from the other side and they debunk it, I mean, could that not potentially move somebody over a little bit more to their side?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's all about the context. I think what you're
Hmm.
describing is much more nuanced and like a
Okay.
critical thinking kind of approach. And I was describing the people that are like, look at what these horrible conservatives think. It's much more. It's about the
Oh,
context of
got
saying,
it.
can you believe these people? It's like
Okay, okay, okay.
it's more of like the drumming
Yes,
up of the outrage
I
versus
get
like
it. I
you
get it
know
completely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because
it's
it's like
more
it's like if
focusing on like the pure insults and the ad hominem stuff versus like a
got it.
way of thinking, right? Yeah, that's
So
what I was going for.
so if I just like if someone just put like something, I don't know, yeah, sent something to me about,
Like, fuck you,
I
David.
yeah, fuck you, I love eating meat. And I, instead of me saying something sarcastic back and like, I just said like, oh, look how horrible these people are, then well, every single meat eater is just gonna be like, well, fuck you, bro. You know what
Yeah, I
I
think that's
mean?
the dynamic. Yeah, I think
Right,
that's
right.
often the dynamic, and I could pull out some examples just from yesterday that I saw where it was like, look at how horrible look at how horrible these people are. Basically, this kind of
Yeah,
framing.
yeah.
This really shows us what's in the hearts of these people.
I get it. I get it. Yeah, I've got a situation going on right now. I wasn't going to mention, but I'll do it because it's relevant. Where because I interviewed Buck Angel, as I mentioned before we got on the recording, I have some people right now, rather than engaging with the conversation that happened between me and Buck Angel, they've gone straight for insults. So wherever these people pop up, it's just straight insult. Look how he's a horrible person, and it's bum bum bum, and it's not there's no opportunity for discussion or debate around what was said. It's straight insult. So actually, what we're talking about here, the example you gave, that's happening right now. So yeah, it's a great real life example for
Well, yeah, I think
how this goes. Yeah.
yeah, I think we're often too afraid to have these conversations with people that might be offensive to people.
Mm,
But I would say, actually when I interviewed someone about for my podcast about
mm,
anti-Semitism. We talked about, and he's kind of somebody who's sort of mixed left and right. He's critical of a lot of things.
mhm,
He's pro-Israel, and I prefaced that talk because I knew that some people might find, especially liberals, might find some of the things he said uh, offensive. I
mhm.
prefaced the talk with the point to me in having these talks isn't even to you know decide on what the right thing or the wrong thing is. The point to
Mhm.
me is by hearing different perspectives you can understand people better, right? It's like
Right.
whether I disagree, I disagreed with that person on some things, for example, but it's like the point to me is I talking to him I better understood the perspectives, like I better
Right.
understood the perspectives of like conservatives who think that liberal, hysteria or liberal takes on anti-Semitism
Mhm.
can be hysterical, over exaggerated, and why conservatives, perceive Republicans as the more, the less anti-Semitic group, or these kinds of
Right.
takes. Basically, I had a better understanding of that talking to him. It doesn't mean I
Right.
have to agree with everything,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
by seeing the perspectives, I'm able to have a more productive conversation, and it also lowers my anger because I'm like, okay, I can see what they're seeing, whether I agree with
Mhm.
it or not. But I think so often,
Mhm.
like we were saying, it's like there's this perception of like you're giving, by even talking to them,
Right.
you're agreeing with everything they say, or
Right.
and it's like and from the flip side, if I went on Tucker Carlson to discuss these ideas, I'd probably get hate from
Oh,
some
completely.
liberals. But
Yeah.
I mean, I want to my point of view is I want to spread, I want to have these conversations as much as possible. And I think the conversation is the productive part and not like the
100%.
reaching the right or the wrong answer, right?
100%. And yeah, it's a complete backwards mentality that somebody would tell you to not go on Tucker Carlson, to not go on Fox News, or for example, in the vegan world, someone would say, don't go and be interviewed by Piers Morgan. Don't go on his show. It's so backwards. And another example of it is with Matt Walsh. I don't know if you probably come across him. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
quite popular. He did that documentary, the What Is a Woman documentary, which has loads of issues in it, but also raises some pretty valid questions, and that didn't get answered. And no one will debate him on it. And it's I don't know if I mean it's not my fight, right? This whole fight. But if it were my fight, I would be begging to debate him. I would want to go and fight him because the same way I want to go and debate, the same way I debate meat eaters on my channel, the same way that this does happen, Um, the opportunity to go on head to head with someone with such a big reach and have your arguments heard by literally millions of people on a topic you are devoting your entire life to. I don't see how that can be a bad thing, but a lot of people really do see that as a bad thing. I really can't. I don't get it. I struggle to really understand that. And
Yeah.
practically, I suppose it's practical reasons. Maybe if it's like, oh, I don't know, can't get there or whatever, and something practical, or it's not worth your time. Maybe if they're not that famous, or it's clear they're just going to troll you. Like, these are good reasons, to be fair, right? But that's not the impression I get with him, and with lots of other people who are just openly asking, come and debate me, and we'll be reasonable, right?
Yeah. On
Mm,
that topic specifically,
mm,
some people might enjoy an episode I did on transgender and gender identity topics. I did that for my podcast. It was like a year plus ago.
okay.
But yeah, the goal with that for me was I interviewed a detransitioned person,
Hmm.
and my goal was examining. I wanted to show a liberal audience a a persuasive viewing of like what the concerns are from, you know, well-meaning and rational people, which I think just does not get much of a hearing. You know, it's like we
No.
sort of like we were saying, it's like we tend to stereotype them as like they're like the worst people over there, right? It's all about
Mm,
bigotry or hate, but it's like we can pretty clearly see what the, you know, rational reasons, even if we disagree with them, we can see
mhm,
the rational reasons for what these concerns are, and they're pretty
mhm,
easy to list, right?
mhm. Yeah.
And then we can have that debate by focusing on what their well-meaning concerns are and not
Mhm.
stereotype them as all like the worst people in that group, right? But I think,
Right.
like you were saying, there's often this view that, and I think a lot of people just haven't thought through these things because they see the, you know, they see the people on any side of an issue, on the other side of an issue,
Mhm.
as representing bigotry, or representing, you know, by engaging with their ideas, they will be harming people on their side,
Right.
or
Right.
an oppressed group or whatever. So I think there's often just this feeling of like, A, I might be harming a group that I care about, or B, I'm going to get a lot of flack from people
True.
for
Yeah.
even engaging in these things. So I think, you know,
Mm.
on both sides, I think there's these understandable pressures. I mean, when you get down
Mhm.
to a lot of it's just about peer pressure, right? It's like
Right.
the same dynamics that
Mhm.
play out anywhere with humans. It's just these various forms of peer pressure or stereotyping, uh,
Mm.
and we feel like we can't have these debates. And you know, like similar to you, I've gotten flack for diving into these issues, and I think
Mhm.
people sometimes assume that I have certain views that I don't, because they're like, well,
Yep.
why would you cover that topic? And the
Yeah.
reason I covered it is because it's not talked about. You know, it's not
Yeah.
like I have a strong opinion one way or the other on a lot of these topics I talk about. But I do feel like if we care about depolarization and healing our divides, like more people have to do the hard work of examining like what the source of our divides are. And in order to do
Mhm.
that, we have to go through some of these tough issues, and acknowledge that, you know, we can have distorted and us versus them viewpoints that just aren't justified a lot of times. Yeah.
Definitely. And I've noticed that when people do what you're doing, and to a lesser extent I do somewhat a little bit of this as well, people tend to misinterpret what I do as also like completely one side. I've been accused of being some far right, and I've been called Nazi for entertaining certain, just discussing ideas, not even saying I believe ideas, just listening to what somebody has to say. Apparently you're a Nazi or whatever. And then if you say what you're saying, like, okay, but we need to we need to meet somewhere, we need to learn, we need to try to understand. Often what I hear people say is, well, that you're a coward. Take a side.
Mm.
Being indifferent is violence. Your indifference is violence. You're a coward. Have you had that yourself?
Yeah, I think a good talk for that I did on my podcast was pretty
Yeah.
recently. I talked to a well-known conflict resolution specialist, Guy
Okay.
Burgess, and he had written actually about, you know, him and his wife do a lot of conflict resolution work, and they had written about their, you know, basically their frustration with a lot of liberal leaning conflict resolution people and
Hmm.
peacekeeping kind of people, because, you know, as you'd expect, a lot of those people are most of those people are politically liberal. And I think there can be these quotes of like this kind of narrative of like there's like a Desmond Tutu quote that goes something like, you know, if you if you remain objective when when an elephant is stepping on a mouse, then you're helping the elephant, or something, you know, something like that,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
implying that like trying to like hand wave and say that by trying to be objective and trying to even do the work of bridge building or
Mm.
conflict resolution, that you are helping the oppressors, however that the oppressor is phrased in that context. But I think the,
Yeah.
you know, and for people interested in that, I'd recommend listening to that talk. But I think the long story short is, you know, that like hand waves over a lot of complexity and nuance in these topics. For example, like, you know, there's liberal people, even amongst the liberal framings of like what constitutes harm or oppression. There can be disagreements on that side, and like
Mhm.
criticisms of those framings. And there's people that can, you know, just well-meaning and rational people can disagree on a lot of these topics of, you
Mhm.
know, how exactly to define these various problems, how to solve them. So if we can see that, we can see that it's not just a clear case of like you're by even having the debate, you're helping one side or the other. I think
Yeah.
that, but I think a lot of that is emotionally driven, right? It's like the us versus them feeling of like,
Yeah.
I perceive harm, and by engaging with who I view as the harm makers, you are helping the harm makers. But I think we just, and then even past that, I think we also, even if we believe that's true, we have to face the reality that
Hmm.
we live in a world with other people who can believe vastly different things from us. I mean, that much is clear. Like, even for the most simplest, like, moral problems, like the trolley problem, for example, like, do you pull some do you divert a train to kill one person when the train is heading for five people, right? Like,
Hmm.
that, people will argue over that all day long,
Yeah.
and that's like the simplest, when all the information is on the table. And we can clearly reach all these different perspectives on these, all that stuff. The trolley problem's all on the surface, and all the information's known,
Hmm.
and we still can have such drastic differences in opinion on that. And then you take, like,
Yeah.
these complex problems in the real world where we don't even know. It's hard for us sometimes to even define what the causes are, or what even the problem is, or what the harm is being done.
Hmm.
So it's not surprising that we can all have very different viewpoints on it. So I think
Hmm.
that gets to the reality of, like, the point of a democracy is not to create a world that you think is great, like that. No, the point of a democracy is not to make progress, however you define progress. The point of
Hmm.
a democracy is to resolve conflicts without the need
Right.
for violence, right? Like that. Then the more we drift from recognizing that's the value of democracy, and the reality that we'll always be surrounded with people with very different viewpoints from us. I think that helps us tone down our anger, and also helps reduce the very things that make us angry. Right? It's like,
Mm.
I think it's not understood how much our emotions, our anger, are the exact things that drive the extreme views that we don't like on the other side. Right? It's like
Yeah.
it's like they're feeding off of each other. Right? It's all related.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the last bit you said there about democracy, I really like it. I think unfortunately, despite your best efforts to make people realize this, it does feel like it's going very, very quickly in the direction we don't want it to, where people are saying democracy is here to create the world I want. And they have no interest in entertaining other people's ideas of what that world should look like. That's what the direction it feels like we're going in very, very quickly. And you mentioned again, I liked how you talk about objective and rational, reasonable people. You keep saying that, and I think that's really important because most people fall into that category. It's what we don't realize. But unfortunately, my opinion on this, I don't know if you agree. Actually, I'll see if you do agree. I think there is a silent, very silent majority that fall into that category. That because of the current climate we're in, this is why these extreme people, groups, whatever, are getting so much success and traction is because there's a silent majority that either can't or won't speak up, probably because they're afraid. Because the second they speak up, they're told, by analyzing this situation, you're a bigot. By using logic, you're disgusting. Or and it's again, I don't know if I'm just biased or if I'm only seeing it from one side. Maybe it's because I'm in the vegan world. I just really see this coming heavily from one side of this divide. Now, obviously, the and that's the left side of it, liberal side of it in our Western world, anyway. Um, and with the other side, I've seen bad things. Don't get me wrong, but I've seen less of it, and I've seen people stoking the flames. Obviously, I've seen that as well. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah,
Yeah.
what's your take on that? Do you agree about this kind of silent majority?
Well, yeah, I think that is a basic polarization dynamic. I think
Right.
if you one interesting talk on this, one of my favorite talks for my podcast was a pretty recent one I did with this group psychology researcher,
Mm.
polarization researcher, Matthew Hornsey. And one of the things he said was, oftentimes we're more afraid of our own side than we are
Right.
of the other side. And that gets back to the peer pressure. A lot of this stuff is about peer pressure, but the basic dynamics of polarization result in an exhausted majority, which is what, there's a study, I think it's called More in Common or Hidden Tribes, where
Okay.
they call it the exhausted majority of these people that are tired of all the us versus them and divisive
Mm.
language on both sides, and they feel kind of like not a part. They basically kind of drop out from the
Right.
discussion, right? And
Right.
some of them stop voting and such. And then when that happens, and we can feel the same effects in our day-to-day lives. Like on Facebook, we might be afraid to criticize an idea on our side because we don't want to be banished from our community,
Mm.
or get insulted and be
Yeah.
thought to be the other. So we tend to like shut down criticism on our side, and that
Mhm.
allows the more extreme, or more often just the not even the more extreme on issues, but the more extreme in the way they view the us versus them divides, right? Like they have
Mhm.
more
Mhm.
emotions about the divides, not necessarily like extreme stances on the issues. But
Right.
I think, yeah, the more of us keep quiet, and the more those voices take power, right?
Mhm. Definitely.
And that's one of that's one of the main things I say in this book I'm working on, is
Mhm.
making the argument that if we can see how these dynamics work, we can see that one of the main ways that we combat them is being willing to criticize divisive and unreasonable behavior on our side. Like, and that's a key point. Like when I talk
Mhm.
to Matthew Hornsey about this, one of his key points is, you look, you're not going to change the other side. Like the other side is only changed from within. They aren't
Mhm.
all of our criticisms and shaming of them don't matter to them because they don't value our opinions. It just
Right.
adds to our divides, right? So the main reason to focus on your side in a political conflict is because it's really the only group you can change. So you can
Mhm.
bring down the angers and the extreme behaviors on both sides by focusing on your side. And that doesn't mean calling out people like in a rude way. It means like saying something like, hey, look at, which I often do. I'll go into these threads on Twitter and
Mhm.
say, like, can you see how the thing you just said that's getting a million likes and shares? Can you see how this thing is adding to our divides, by
Mhm.
basically painting all Trump supporters as white supremacists, this kind of stuff.
Mm.
And I think that's a key part of it, but it also gets back to why these things are so hard to combat, because our
Mhm.
instinct when we're in a us versus them divide, our instinct is to not help the other side. And how that manifests is
Right.
us being afraid to criticize our own side. So it's like our instinct is completely wrong, because our human instinct is to be like, we have to be quiet. We don't want to hurt our side. I
Okay.
don't want to say anything that might help them. But that's exactly what drives the divides, is like our increasingly shut down, scared to say something kind of approach.
I get you. Yeah, you want to. I mean, intuitively, it feels better to want to be a united front and to not show cracks in the veneer, right? But
Yeah,
then the problem is, then you never weed out the people, the problem makers, the troublemakers. If you're not willing to kind of show the cracks, you're gonna have these people causing a lot of problems that going unchecked, right?
yeah, and there's actually really interesting research about this. Like this was this was interesting because it was an idea that I came to on my own of thinking it through, and then Matthew Hornsey told me there was research about how, for example, in the Israeli-Palestine conflict,
Mm.
when they showed people in-group conflict, like from the other side. So if they showed Israelis like disagreements amongst the Palestinians about
Mhm.
how they should behave, and like in-group criticisms of Palestinians criticizing other Palestinians and this kind of thing, the
Mhm.
Israelis became more understanding and less angry at the Palestinians.
Mhm.
There's research showing the importance of this, and I think
Mhm.
yeah, it's just very under-examined how important that is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see more information on that. I guess intuitively you'd expect that, in a time of war or conflict, that the other side would capitalize on the fact that
Oh
one
yeah.
side was arguing, right? You think
Yeah,
they
I have
would?
something to say there too. I was going to say one interesting thing, counterintuitive thing I discovered, or not discovered, but I was DMing on Twitter with somebody who's a pretty influential contributor to like conservative news, like Fox News kind of appearances, and she didn't
Okay.
want to go on record, but one of the things she said was, uh, I wish the conservatives were just as cohesive and together on issues as the liberals were. And I was like, what are you
Mhm.
talking about? Like, are you crazy? Like, the perception that liberals have is like we're always fighting amongst each other, and the conservatives are like the concerted front. And then
Right,
that
yeah.
got me interested, so I started talking to other conservatives about that. And like, yeah, they're all like, yeah, the liberals are so good at getting together and aligning on things, and we're just always fighting amongst ourselves. And so that kind of gets to these stereotypes we have about the other
Right,
side,
right.
because in any group conflict, the group psychology says that we will perceive our side as tremendously complex and nuanced and full of all these different voices, but we'll perceive the other side as this concerted, like uniform, monolithic group that's like coming to get us, and
Mhm.
they're all this as bad as their worst group, right, or as
Right,
bad as their
right.
worst member. So it gets to these, and that's really eye opening. When I shared that on Twitter, like what she said, people were like, "What the fuck is she talking about?" But I
That's
can
funny.
see it really gave me insight in, like, yeah, that's exactly what group psychology research shows,
Right,
and we
right.
shouldn't be surprised by it. It's common sense, really.
So one of the things you discussed with, was it Matthew Hornsey? Is that the name? Am I
Mhm.
getting that right? Yeah, I listened to that podcast, and one of the things you discussed, I wanted to ask you about here. Actually, it's obviously it's relevant to everything we've already discussed. He had this great anecdote about how he was researching hydroxychloroquine, right? And then Trump also mentioned it, and then all of a sudden he was being accused of being some evil Trump supporter, even though he found out about it before Trump, right? I found that was quite funny. It became a proxy for ideology. Like people assumed his beliefs because of him saying, "Hey, here's a drug that might be useful." It was quite a funny story.
Yeah, and he
And
wasn't to clarify in
uh,
case he wasn't researching himself, but maybe you meant
okay,
online research.
I
But
meant
yeah,
like
I
just
think
looking. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
He was
yeah,
just looking
exactly, yeah.
around. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he
Sure.
was just saying that it got demonized just because Trump
Right,
said it, even though
right.
there was ongoing research about its effectiveness for COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, that's what I mean. Yeah, and he
Mhm.
and then you guys mentioned that following maybe following on from that, or another point, you were talking about the kind of disinformation campaigns that go across social media. That around the time of when COVID was kicking off, let's say, and a couple of other things, and people getting confused, and you mentioned that there are campaigns that go out there to purposefully misinform people, so for whatever reason, political gain, whatever it is, right? Could be anything, money, political gain, blah blah blah. And then it makes people mistrust the people given the information, the government, or the health organizations or whatever. And I found that to be intriguing, and I wanted to ask you a pretty tough question, actually. So you said you, in your research for this book, you'd found these campaigns and you were able to define what they look like, right? These kind of, when they go out there to do a campaign to try and make us. I think you said, to make a scientific conclusion into a scientific debate. But from my understanding, the both sides do this. Like, actually, there are multiple factors in this. Even the government side, um, they also do campaigns to increase trust, and also they lie. Like we both know, they lie with what they do with the food, the food pyramids and whatever, the meat, dairy, eggs, things they've pushed in the past that have been shown to be, they didn't know what they were doing. Even with this recent thing with Pfizer refusing to release all of the information about the, I won't say the word in case it gets in trouble, but so it's what I'm trying to say is, like, it's obvious there's divide when people don't know what the fuck is going on. In your experience, from your research, how do we even know who's telling the truth at any point?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, I was actually just working on a chapter, like kind of a wrap up chapter for the book about this, where it's like I think there is often a misplaced emphasis on what the right information is, or that we can determine what the right information is, or a lot of liberals will say things like, the problem is this misinformation and we need to correct this misinformation. But that leaves a lot of things out of the picture, like, obviously we're going to have a hard time uh, defining what the right narratives are, because we can disagree so much. Like we clearly can disagree so much, even
Mhm.
amongst, say, in the liberal group on things. So I think it points at a misplaced emphasis on defining what the right or wrong narratives is. And I think, to me, it's more about, maybe we should try to get people to be equally skeptical of all the information, right? It's like, so say, like say I had a childhood friend who's a Trump supporter, and when I hung out with him, he was basically like, I don't believe, you can't tell what's true or false anymore. And so, and I was like, well, where do you get your ideas? He's like, well, just stuff people share on Facebook. And I'm like, well, you can't be like skeptical of, the liberal leading mainstream media and like just absorb these other, ideas uncritically. Like, I
Yeah.
think that gets at the idea of like, well, skepticism is fine. Like you say, like governments are wrong. They're just a bunch of people, right? Are we really surprised that governments get stuff wrong? It's just a bunch of people doing stuff and having various motivations and to
Hmm.
save face or doing whatever they think is wrong or whatever they think is right, even if it's wrong. So it's like we focus too much on like, you know, casting blame and like deciding what the right narratives are. But I think we should just, foster an environment of like being skeptical of it all. It's like, I'm not, and if we did that, we wouldn't have people like taking a framing they saw in one newspaper or TV show and then running with it as if it's the
Hmm.
truth or something. It's like we would have an environment where people would be like, oh, I'm going to take that with a grain of salt and maybe I'll balance it out by reading something somewhere else and try to reach a more nuanced perspective on it. If we
Okay.
foster an environment where, skepticism was a good thing and not like,
Hmm.
hey, believe this stuff over here because it's right.
Hmm.
So I
Yeah.
think that helps resolve it a little bit in the sense that like that's an
Okay.
argument that I think could be persuasive to people on both sides and
Hmm.
just be more skeptical of it all and like why do we have to feel the need to reach the right conclusion immediately? A lot of times there's this like we have to know what it is right now. It's like, well, why don't you just
Right.
wait a week or two until things settle down? It's like, why do you have to figure it out and be outraged about whatever it is right now? Let's let the smoke settle a little bit and see, who the bad guys were exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That makes sense, especially the bit you talked about. You hear one thing, then okay, try and balance it out. Search for the opposite. I try to do that quite a lot when a conservative or a liberal, either side or whatever. Sometimes I don't even know who they are. I just see something and it pops up, and I'm like, oof, that annoys me, or I actually think I agree with that, but that can't be that can't be it. I have to go and look for the alternative. You got to go find the other side and then see, all right, I've got both sides. And yeah, you do become more nuanced. I agree with you. You start to feel a bit less angry or less worked up about the other thing once you realize there's another side to the story, and it might still be very bad, but it's not as bad as it was, and that does
I,
really help.
I will say too, one thing that might address some of your points about
Sure.
seeing more problems on the liberal side. I mean, I think one of the things there is that liberal liberal philosophy and arguments are the predominant force in the Western world. Right? They've
Yep.
dominated universities. They've dominated media, news media, mainstream entertainment media.
Hmm.
So I think that can help explain why a lot of the some of the framings that we may disagree with that we can find them so frustrating, right? It's
Hmm.
because the domination of the culture, uh, the predominance in the culture leads to people just not being aware of what the conservative arguments are, right? Like of or just arguments in general that question some of these major narratives, and I think so that there is this real imbalance in power in the culture wars, which is part of what drives
Mm.
conservative frustration and anger is like they
Yep.
feel like they are the underdog, right? But I think it helps explain why it can be, you know, there can be this imbalance of like so many people just not even being aware of what the conservative arguments are a lot of times and what the better conservative arguments are.
Sure.
And research shows this too. Like if you look at research on you know conservatives understand liberals thoughts more than liberals understand conservatives thoughts. That's shown in books like Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind and in other research. And then it shows that in surveys that where conservatives say they don't feel like they're misunderstood by mainstream, or they don't feel like they're understood by mainstream liberal leaning uh, outlets. But so
Hmm.
conservatives are always consuming liberal ideas, but liberals are seldom consuming conservative ideas, and I think that helps
Yep.
explain why there can be an imbalance of like Yeah, I mean, a lot of the conservatives I've talked to for research for my book will have a good understanding of what liberal arguments are, and I think that's
Mm,
often not the case on the
right.
reverse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I understand. That's probably linked in with what I said earlier about mostly liberals refusing to engage or debate somebody on the other side. Well, obviously they're not going to understand what the other side thinks and believes if they refuse to interact with them, other than just trying to attack them. So what? Let's close off on something quite practical, actually. So let's say there's somebody watching right now who or listening who absolutely despises the other side with every inch of them, with all their heart. What advice would you give them to kind of practical advice? I mean, what can they do today to fix that and you know I don't know, get rid of the hatred and work towards a more productive solution for whoever they hate, and trying to figure something out. What do you think practically they could do?
yeah, it's a good question. I would say I would say if someone really does have an interest and there's plenty of books out there on American depolarization. I would say listen to my podcast too, like because I feel like the argument I'm making in my book is we really can't rely on these big institutions because the big institutions are part of what polarize us, right? Like the
Mm,
the media, the politicians, like it's all human nature, and it's not to really cast blame on them because in many ways it's out of their control. Like the more dynamic us versus them energy
mm.
and emotions that society has, however it grows, manifests as creating more polarizing us versus them leaders, more polarized media
Oh,
producers.
yeah.
Yeah, so the institutions are part of what drive the divides. We end up the us versus them energy in our group, the emotions give the wind to the sails of the more polarizing people in the media and in the political leaders. So I think we need to recognize part of the solution is recognizing that. I think in order to change things, we have to focus more on ourselves as promoting a narrative of like we need to get more regular citizens basically seeing the problems, and if you can get because we need to tone down basically the us versus them unreasonable forms of us versus them anger in our own hearts and our own
Mhm.
minds. And the more of us do that, so it's basically needs to be more of a grassroots approach, in my opinion. And the more that people do that, the more people who are influential, who have more influence, will also
Mhm.
see those problems. It's just like the more we talk about it in general. But I would
Okay.
say, if people are interested in that, like if they have a lot of anger
Mhm.
at the other side, I would say, listen to some of the episodes of my podcast, which I think are a good way in.
Mhm.
And there are depolarization books. For example, like on the liberal side, there's a great book called Beyond Contempt, and that's by a very progressive, very liberal woman Erica Edelson, who came to realize that a lot of the contributions to our divides came from the liberal side, right? And there's
Right.
people on the conservative side who write about that too.
Mm.
I know somebody actually writing a book right now who's kind of like the conservative version of me, and he's very interested in depolarization, and he's
Right.
gonna he's gonna talk about different things, right? But he's gonna have the same basic ideas of like how our distorted and overly us versus them animosity is creating the very
Mhm.
things we're angry about, that kind of thing. So I
Okay.
think that the work is out there for people on both sides of any divide, and there's even like just general writings about how polarization. I think part of it is realizing how common this is across the world because we tend to be so focused on our specific, countries' divides,
Mhm.
and we
Yep.
we tend to think like it's all about these specific issues, right? The
Mhm.
issues are very important, but I mean the issues are often just the manifestations of our emotions because the more emotions we have, the harder lined our stances get, the less we're willing to negotiate. So it's like a lot of times the emotion is what's driving the very things we're angry about. Yeah.
That's great. I think it's great advice to check out your podcast, as it is your entire focus. So if somebody is going through these emotions and having these problems that we've discussed, and that would be a really good place to start. And could you tell us again the name of the podcast? And obviously it'll be in the link in the I suppose I'll put it in the pinned comment. That'll be do you want that to be like the primary thing people come to, or would you rather
That'd
they
be
went to
great.
Twitter or?
No, yeah. The podcast is great, and yeah,
Great,
thanks for doing that. It's called the people. It's called People Who Read People is the name of the podcast,
great.
and it's not only focused on polarization. It's also focused on like kind of some practical, reading behavior kind of stuff of various
Great,
sorts.
great.
But and I do have on my website on the website is behavior-podcast.com, and I have a compilation of the politics related episodes there, the polarization related episodes. So yeah.
Perfect. Great. And people can find you on Twitter where it's at a poker player, right?
Yeah, a poker player. Yeah,
Cool. At a poker player,
yeah.
when did you get that? When did you start Twitter?
It was like 2010, I think, and I think some
Oh,
people thought, some people thought it sounded kind of pretentious or something. But I was like, hey, I started. It was like, hey, I'm just a poker player. That was how I thought of it.
it's a good one because
Uh,
it's that it's a. I guess you could probably sell that for quite a bit
hey,
if Twitter
maybe I
keeps
could.
growing. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've been trying to get at David Rams. I keep checking someone else has got it inactive account, and it's just been like that for years. So I have to go for
Oh,
it's
so it's just
David
gone. It's
Rams.
just gone. And somebody just has it, but not
No,
using it.
no, they're right. The account's right there. It's
Oh,
open,
okay.
and they have it. There's David Ramos, and the guy just isn't is just not active. It's never
Oh,
posted
gotcha.
anything, no profile pic. So
Uh,
it's a nightmare. But no, great. It was great to have you here, mate. Really appreciate this. This was very useful information for all of us, and especially with everything we've discussed and how bad it is, and how this division seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. It's good to have someone working on it. When can we expect the book? Do you have a date for that?
Yeah, it'll be well, hopefully it'll be by like early February. And
Cool.
for people who are interested, if you sign up for a 1 year subscription to my podcast right now for a limited time, you get a free, well, American subscribers, I should say, get
Okay.
a free paperback mailed to them. So if
Cool.
anybody's interested in that in America, you can check that out. And yeah, thanks a lot, David. I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for that.